Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Kay. So today I want to share my story of how I got my first job as a junior software developer and what my life kind of looked like after having just finished a coding bootcamp and how I dealt with failure having been rejected from my first junior developer interview as well. Now, a lot of these videos out there, they're always quite rose tinted, and it's part of the reason why I actually initially gave up coding. I did it for a while and I just stopped. And it's because a lot of people, they'll tell you to learn X, Y, and Z, or they'll tell you to, build this, learn this if you want to build this project, without any kind of real tangible view of what it is that goes into learning X, Y, or Z. And usually what happens is people try and learn to code, they'll see just how much work there is, they won't really have any kind of guidance, and then they'll just give up because they find it way too hard. Now, myself, I did actually go through that feeling multiple times when I was first learning to code. And then when I finally finished my boot camp, I had that feeling as well, because then it actually came to applying for jobs. And my first job that I applied for, I got to the final round, but I got rejected. I do have a video on why I got rejected the first time round that you can watch if you do want to learn more about that. But yeah, I do remember quite clearly having just finished the boot camp, and a lot of my cohort classmates that I finished with, I remember a lot of them getting interviews and I was kind of applying and not really hearing back from much. And a few of them even had offers, which was good, it's really great for them. But when you're kind of seeing people that you trained with getting offers for jobs and you're kind of sat there not really making that much progress, it can be quite discouraging and kind of, either depending on your mindset, it might make you kind of feel like giving up, or it might actually motivate you more. For me, it did actually motivate me, but there was a point where I kind of questioned if it was even right for me because I just wasn't really making much progress. But yeah, I did interview for one company and I got rejected. And I thought it was quite a cool company as well. They were using a tech stack that I was interested in using. It was .NET and .NET Core and Azure and then some other stuff as well. And it was a cloud-based banking system as well. So I thought it was a pretty cool product. So I did actually want to work there, but I'm kind of glad looking back now that I did get rejected, because then I wouldn't have gotten to the current company that I'm in, which I prefer a lot more. So during that phase of that initial rejection, decide, now I need to either sink or swim. Because I didn't actually have that much money to last me. I only had about 3 months worth of saving, and I was pretty much jobless at that point. I was just applying for junior developer jobs. So I gave it 110%. During the day, I was applying for jobs. In the afternoon, I was working my own projects. And then in the evenings, I would go to either tech meetups where, you might actually find people who are hiring for positions. You might get referrals from existing developers, or you might just make some contacts with some recruiters as well. So I was doing that in the evening. If there wasn't like an event on or anything for me to kind of like participate in, then I just carried on working on my personal projects. And I did that for about a solid 2.5 to 3 weeks, and then that's when another kind of internal recruitment cycle came around, and I definitely felt like I'd made a lot more progress during those 3 weeks, just because of how much work I'd been putting in. What you're going to often find is, if you're not really getting that many job replies, it might just be to do with the market, not necessarily your own ability or skill level. And sometimes all of the interviews and job offers come in one big chunk, and that was kind of what happened next for me. So I received about 5 different interviews all in 1 week for the following week after. So this was about coming up to a month in. At that point, I was thinking, okay, how am I going to prepare for about 5 different interviews? Now, what you're often going to find is a lot of the times when you're not really hearing back much from the jobs that you've applied for, might just be to do with the market, not necessarily your own skills. And sometimes all of the job offers and interviews kind of come in one chunk, and that was the case for me. So the following week, after I'd been really working my own stuff, improving my portfolio projects and everything, I received 5 interview offers all in 1 week. And so at that point, I was kind of thinking, all right, so what do I do now? I've got 5 interview offers and kind of have to prepare for all of them. One of them required a tech test as well, which required some time to do. So at that point, I was stressing quite a lot. So I was talking to some friends who I knew were developers, and they were kind of helping me out with common questions, like things to practice. And I was speaking to the careers team as well for my bootcamp and kind of arrange one-to-one mock interviews with them. So it came to my first interview on a Monday. It was on like the opposite end of London. It took me, over an hour, about an hour 20 minutes to get to. So location wise, it wasn't very good. And I walked in. It was like a tiny little building, and I got buzzed in. I went upstairs, and there was like two guys in suits, and there was one guy who was just in a corner somewhere on a laptop, just hacking away. Um, and they kind of just asked me what kind of things I've learned from a technical perspective. They asked me a little bit about databases, foreign keys, primary keys, nothing too crazy. I met the senior developer there, who was actually the only developer, so that was a major red flag for me, that the tech team was one guy. And also, for a company, they told me that they'd been around for about 25 years, and given just how small they were, they hadn't really grown much in 25 years. That was another flag for me. So I kind of did the interview process with them. The questions weren't too tricky. It was a lot more about motivation and kind of like what I wanted to do in the future, rather than something that's too technical. And they pretty much offered me the position on the spot. Problem was that the salary was way below what I was expecting. So the bootcamp I did, they quoted about 32k as your starting salary on average, and these guys were offering about 21, which is significantly lower than what I was expecting. And at that point, I felt like, I just did not want to accept that offer. They did ask me kind of what I was looking for, and they said that, that's not something that they can really offer. So they said the offer was there, but given I had, 4 other interviews during that week, I felt that I could get something better. I would say, a lot of people will say just take whatever you can get, but if you're really confident that there is something better that you can get, and you have got kind of something in the works as well, or something potential, then I would say hold off on accepting the first thing that you get offered. You could find something much better. So came next to a couple of interviews that I had with Deloitte, one with Ernst & Young, and another with an asset management firm. So with the interview with Ernst & Young, it was an initial phone call interview, so I pretty much did it. Again, a lot of competency-based questions, a little bit about projects that I did, and then I basically never heard from them again, so I assumed that that was a rejection. So moving on, I had my 2 interviews with Deloitte. So I was interviewed Deloitte for 2 different positions, a DevOps position and a Salesforce engineering position. So that interview, I went there in person to the Deloitte office, and that was the office itself. I walked in, it was, like the really big front reception desk, shiny walls, everyone in suits and whatnot. So it's an environment I was more familiar with, having come from a kind of big corporate background already. And I remember quite clearly, the name of the person who was interviewing me was emailed to me beforehand, so I decided to check him up on LinkedIn, just as you do, kind of seeing if there was anywhere that I could connect with him on. And I saw his picture, and it was like this kind of bold guy with a goatee, and he looked kind of intimidating as well. And so I thought, okay, this guy is probably going to grill me. I got there and then sat down. I was just waiting for the person to pick me up for my interview, and then this guy kind of walks in, and he's wearing like one of those code meme t-shirts, and he's like, "Oh, hey, Kay, right?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Oh, yeah, I'm here to interview you." And I was like, "Oh, wait, this is the same guy." And his impression in person was just completely different to what he was like, what I perceived him to be from that picture. So we decided to walk over to this kind of like cubicle room. It had like nice big comfy chairs, had like a tea in hand. And we just decided to have a chat about kind of how I started learning to code, what I was doing beforehand, and kind of what they do at Deloitte in terms of the clients they work with, what kind of things they do in the Salesforce and DevOps roles. And yeah, it was mostly about getting to know myself and my motivations. So I kind of just explained, what I wanted to do in the future, which was, to learn more about the tech stack that they use and try and get to, just learn more about code really. And then we kind of discussed more about how Deloitte tends to support their employees, what kind of resources they provide, what kind of areas of development there are as well that you can get involved in. And this chat kind of went on for about an hour and a half longer than it should have. But it was quite an insightful conversation. I definitely learned a lot more about the role in the company. At the end of that interview, I kind of waited until the next day. I was preparing for my final interview, which I had with the asset management firm. So there was a tech test for that. I'd submit it as well. But later on, I did receive a message saying that I'd been offered the positions. So the salary for that was 32.5K, which was more along the lines of what I was expecting. So I pretty much had some kind of insurance to fall back on. But the asset management firm that I had the final interview for, that was kind of like my top choice. So I decided to go about just preparing for that. And I did put a fair amount of effort into that technical test. I don't think I've ever put more effort into a technical test before. So I went about and I created a really good README, which essentially documented all of the test cases I'd ran, all of the things I could have included had I had more information, and I kind of broke down the task into individual user stories as well. So I put quite a lot of effort into this README. Now, when I actually had the interview on the day, so I remember getting off, it was only about a 30-minute train ride for me, so the commute was the best out of all of the places that I'd interviewed for. And I walked in and it was like this massive kind of like glass building. I sat down, got my little badge to like get in, and I arrived about 30 minutes early, so I was just kind of on my phone doing a bit of a recap on like interview questions and just waiting really. And then I remember someone else came and sat down next to me and they had like a badge as well. And then started talking to them and they said they were here for the same interview. So I was like, okay, so they're interviewing multiple people on the same day. And then as the minutes went by, more and more people showed up, and there was about 8 of us. And one of the people I recognized from the bootcamp, he was in a cohort above me, and he sat down as well. So by then, I was like, okay, so they're interviewing all of us in one day. So that was actually pretty interesting, which is actually surprisingly common in a lot of large firms. They tend to kind of do all of the interviews in groups. And so it came to about, I think it was like 10:30 or 10 o'clock, something like that. And someone came down, it was the head of technology, and he basically came and picked us up and took us upstairs to like this kind of like big open plan floor where there's like a coffee machine and like other stuff as well. So got myself a drink and we were greeted by a couple of other junior developers that were there as well. And these junior developers, they had basically been hired by this company, but they did the same bootcamp as us previously. So they'd been there for about 5-6 months already, so they already knew quite a bit about the company. So from there, it was just about getting to know them, asking them some questions, kind of like a little bit of an icebreaker. And yeah, it gave me a chance just to kind of ask them, what their progression looked like from having finished the bootcamp, getting that offer, and to what they've done now. So we got told that the day was going to be split into 2 halves. Half of us were going to be doing a review of our tech test and one-to-one interview, and then the other half they were going to be given like a tour, and then we would reconvene then to do a kind of a round-robin interview as well. So I started off doing my tech test review first. So I remember there was basically a whole row of like senior engineers that showed up, and they basically came in pairs, and they each pair, so I think about 16 of them, they would take one of us to one of the booked rooms, and then would kind of walk in. I came in with my laptop in hand, and I walked into the room, and then they asked me to connect my laptop to the big screen with the Bluetooth. That was actually a struggle to do, and when I did connect it up, the mouse input was like really, really laggy. So I'd be moving my mouse, and the cursor would move like 2 seconds later. So it was a little bit of a challenge to try and control that. But got my tech test up, and I was like literally sweating at this point, thinking, oh man, they're gonna grill me. I've probably like done something wrong. They're gonna ask me like really hard questions on how to refactor this in some complicated way. But literally the first thing they asked me is just kind of walk through what I'd written. So I just explained my methods, my logic, why I'd done something a certain way, and I walked them through my README as well, which they actually quite liked. They liked the fact that I documented everything, and there is a common scenario known as feature creep, and that's when you start to add features to your program which weren't explicitly asked for. So I did actually document that as well. So I said what I would have added that would have been nice, but it wasn't explicitly stated in the requirements. And that's something that they actually value quite a lot. because they tend to follow like this kind of rigid requirement-based workflow using Jira's. So I did that, and they actually didn't really say very much. They weren't speaking very much, so I wasn't sure if that was a bad thing or a good thing. Um, but I kind of just did my thing, and then came to like going through my tests. So testing is a very, very big part of programming. I showed them my tests, showed them everything that I unit tested, what edge cases I looked out for, how I kind of asserted for exceptions as well. If there was a wrong input, or the code, there was an error in there somewhere. And yeah, they kind of like just nodded and said, yeah, okay, good. They kind of asked me a bit about maybe how I might have tested for more things and kind of better names I could have used for certain variables, but that was pretty much it. They didn't really say much. So at that point, I wasn't sure if that was a good or a bad thing, but yeah, they kind of just asked me what other stuff I was working on. So I showed them like a project I was doing, which was a cryptocurrency analysis tool. So it was a full stack web application. It had like a database to store, your user information and portfolio, and it was connected to an API as well to get live cryptocurrency data. So they were like pretty impressed with that. Yeah, it then came to the round robin style interview. So that was actually really interesting. So it was kind of like speed dating. So each one of us were dotted in different corners of the room, and we would have a senior engineer who would come down, and they'd sit with you for about 10 minutes and interview you. They just ask you like rapid fire questions, and then after about 10 minutes they would rotate. So the questions varied. It was like basic competency stuff, or why this company, like or what have you liked so far about today, or why did you get into coding, what's your favorite language, or it's just a lot of different quite varied questions. And you get to know them as well. You get to ask them like kind of what they're working on. After each of the senior developers, they've kind of rotated between each person. That would take about 40 minutes to interview 4 people. So by the end, each of the senior devs, they've interviewed each of the 4 candidates. So that gives them like a much better idea, having gotten a feel of every person, to see who would fit in well in their team. So we, towards the end of the day, kind of all reconvened. It was 8 of us, kind of sat around this big oval table with like the head of technology guy and a couple of other engineers that worked there. And then it was basically just a overall Q&A. They asked for questions. I asked a few that I normally ask. So what kind of resources they provide for us in order to continue learning, kind of what's expected of us on our first month there as junior developers, and just kind of what the company's structure will look like in terms of the different teams within the tech department. And yeah, pretty much towards the end of that, it was all goodbyes there, and then we all handed in our day passes and exit the building. And at that point, all 8 of us, we just started like asking each other what we got asked, like on our technical test reviews. And I remember quite vividly one guy saying, "Oh man, they like grilled me. They found so many bugs in my code, and like one of my tests were failing." And yeah, that did kind of reassure me, the fact that they didn't grill me like that. So I'm assuming everything had gone well. And yeah, at that point I was like, okay, it was for 2 positions and there was 8 of us. So there was a 25% chance of me getting hired for this place. And I did have my Deloitte offer as well to fall back on. So at that point, I was kind of just waiting until the next week, and pretty much that whole week had been going by. They said they'll get back on Monday. This was a Friday, and I did get a message, and my heart was like racing, thinking, "Oh man, this is it." And I opened a message from the careers team at my bootcamp, who kind of, they would be the first ones to know if we got accepted or not. And they basically said, "Oh, they haven't gone back to us yet. I'll keep chasing up on them." So again, came to like the Wednesday, I got another message thinking, "Oh, this is the offer," or rejection. And they said the same thing again. And then it came to the Friday, and I was like, part of me thinking, all right, it's a Friday, it's probably going to be the same thing again. And they're going to say, okay, we're still waiting. It's going to be next week you hear back. And I opened the message, and, the message looked different. And my eyes kind of just scanned. And the first thing I was scanning for was the word sorry. And that's because, every time I get a rejection from somewhere, the word sorry is always there. And I kind of just see it straight away as the first word. I just saw straight away, congratulations. and my heart was racing. So I was like, oh, there's a congratulations in there. Let me carry on reading. And it was like, they were really impressed. They'd love to offer you the position. And at that point, I was like, wow, okay, my weekend is made. Like this is the moment. Like I'm gonna be a software developer in like my ideal company using my ideal tech stack. I was like literally celebrating, and yeah, I just went around, like posted on all my social media. Got the job, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, everything. Now the timing for it was pretty good because I only had, if I'd really stretched my meals and saved as much as I could, about 2 more months worth of savings. But I was due to start about 2 to 3 weeks after I'd received that offer. So with that, I was basically able to sustain myself and then get my first paycheck, which would have then allowed me to just carry on living as normal. Now, fast forward to when I did actually start, that's when I realized I actually don't know anything, like literally nothing. My first task was just to write a script in T-SQL, and I didn't know any T-SQL. And so it was essentially a task of me learning, how to do something in a scripting language that I've never used. Um, and, it was to do with the databases and tables, and I didn't actually know what the databases looked like, so I'd spend time looking through that as well. And it was just a massive learning curve. And then even basic things that I'd been doing before, such as using Git, those became tricky as well because they don't actually use Git in the same way that I did with the command line. They have like the extensions with the UI on pretty much everything. Using it now, I actually do prefer it way more than doing it manually through the command line. But at the time, that's what I knew. So I kind of had to really adapt myself, and I had a massive case of imposter syndrome, thinking, oh, they've hired someone who just can't do anything. And this was coming up to Christmas time, so I had a chance to learn a lot of stuff on Pluralsight courses during the holidays and just really kind of upskill myself and learn what I needed to learn for that company. Now, I would say that imposter syndrome, a year on now since I started, it never really goes away. I spoke to senior developers who've been developing for like 20 years, and they say they still have imposter syndrome. It's just like one of those things that you learn to live with. Because most of the time when you are working, there are things that you've just never done before and you won't know how to do. And when you are doing it, you're always questioning if you're doing it the right way, the best way to do it. And, you know, you can reduce that feeling through more experience and just attending, a lot of things like community of practice sessions and just reading around general technology as a whole. So yeah, I'm going to end the video there. That was my journey on how I became a software developer, having gone from a boot camp, and my whole journey on what my job searching process looked like and just how I tackled it. So like always, guys, thanks so much for watching. Please do like and subscribe if you're new here, and share with anyone who you feel like is going to help. And hopefully this has been inspirational and motivational for you watching. So like always, guys, I will see you in the next video. See ya.